Right. So good morning, everyone. It's my joy and privilege to be standing here today at this welcome event addressing all of you. So thinking back about what Prof. Tan said, I'm 43 this year and I do have healthcare needs too. So I hope to be able to rely on this new batch of students, right, to take care of me when I'm 70, maybe longevity, right? So just find something to work with Prof. Kennedy on. So a bit of a disclaimer, okay. While I'm an employee of MSD, right, the views that I present today are purely on my own, based on my experience in this industry. So they do not represent my company in any way. Okay, so so for today, Matthew and myself, we would be co-presenting today to share with you guys a little bit more about what are our thoughts and views around how pharmaceutical R&D is advancing right now in this era of precision medicine. And the presentation outline here would really focus on, I can't really see it, understand this. Okay. The presentation outline here would really be focused around three main questions, right? Like where healthcare and drug discovery are really heading in the next decade or so, how this context of precision medicine will really shape the future of our patients and how your training here in this course really matters. And then last of all, Matthew will talk a little bit about the skills that is becoming important for the future scientists, and that will add value for the future drug discovery. Okay, so I just wanted to start out with a little bit of a reflection. Like when I first started my training in pharmacology more than 20 years ago, I would never imagine that today we would be able to use AI to discover drugs. I would never imagine that we would be able to grow organs in the lab. I would never imagine that we would be designing drugs that's really tailored to individual patients, right? So I would like to encourage you guys to think about healthcare like 20 years from now. What is going to be different from today, right? Like how would new medicines be discovered? How will our patients be treated? And what role will you play in your different fields of expertise to really shape this? So if we look at the past, we've seen that medicine was really reactive, meaning that you fall sick, you see a doctor, you get treatment. And most of the treatment are one size fits all, right? And we do have 20 years ago very limited biology understanding on the diseases. When we discover drugs in the lab, we really utilize like sequential experimentation. We rely a lot on animal models. And then when we conduct like clinical trials, they were very large broad clinical trials. What's going to be happening in the future is that we're going to be seeing more proactive, predictive and preventive medicines. We will be using technologies like multi-omics, systems biology, AI, building of disease-relevant human models to really think about how we can use biomarkers coming from these technologies to really shape our clinical trials, right? So let's explore a little bit today, right? Okay. So what does the future of drug discovery really look like in this emerging innovative climate? So imagine yourself being a student, right? And then speaking to a doctor, right? And then you'll be asking, oh, Prof, I've been hearing a lot about precision medicine lately. So what is it exactly, right? So your prof might give you the standard answer, right? To say that right now, this is an approach to healthcare that is no longer one size fits all, right? We are focusing on prevention, diagnosis, and treatment based on the unique characteristics of each patient. And then after that, you'll come to me probably after this event to ask me, oh, so how would we design drugs for unique patient groups, right? So I will tell you that within the industry, we are looking at ways where we are trying to adjust drug choices, the dosage tailored for individual patients, what kind of drug modalities would suit different patients. And really our goal is to provide the information and the data that's needed by clinicians to really deliver the right treatment to the right patients at the right time. Okay, so let's today explore a few concepts that we use in modern drug discovery. Okay, so the first concept I'd like you to take home with today is that right now we are really embracing a new era of drug molecules. When I first started out pharmacology and started working in a company 17 years back, we were all focused on small molecules and monoclonal antibodies and vaccines. But with the power of science technology, AI data science, innovation. And of course, this has to be powered by smart humans, right? We can't do it with just AI alone. Today, at the current state, we are seeing an emergence of really innovative bioengineered therapies, right? We are having things like targeted protein degraders. We have peptides that enable us to target proteins that small molecules can't really reach. We have things like antibody drug conjugates, where we are utilizing the precision of the antigen specificity of these antibodies to deliver toxic payloads to tumor cells so that we can kill tumor cells specifically. So I think these are all very emerging and very exciting technologies that I hope that you get a chance to learn about in your course. And ultimately, what we would be seeing today and tomorrow is that the future medicine cabinet will look very different from what we see today. Okay. The other concept I'd like to have you bring home is that we are starting to think about how we can incorporate human biology very much earlier into the drug discovery process, right? And we are hoping to be able to shape that paradigm shift from using animal-centric models to more human-relevant disease models, right? So if we think about the traditional approach where animal models really lead the way, we test our molecules in animals, and then we implement them in trials and we see the outcome later in the humans, right? And if you think about this context, okay, if you're developing a drug for metabolic diseases, monitoring how a mouse is running in a lab under air-conditioned environment is very different from how Peter would be running in the hot sun, right? So how can we think about ways to model this with higher translation at a lower risk and with a lower cost? So right now, the industry is really thinking about how we are utilizing patient data, human tissues, even iPSCs derived from humans to be able to develop, tools like organoids and organ-on-chips in the lab, and then combining it with, digital pathology, AI imaging, and some of the quantitative technology, right, to think about how we integrate this information to really understand different disease mechanisms, different patient populations, and the biomarkers. So ultimately, the goal here is to really drive the paradigm shift, right, into a more human-centric biology. Okay. And then the other insight that I hope to have you bring home today is that we do need connected biology, right? So what are these three connected biology about, right? So first of all, with technologies like multi-omics, so we're talking about how we study genes and RNAs and proteins and lipids in the body, right? And also how they look like in the spatial context of the tissue. We are really trying to understand what drives the disease, right? Which pathways are being dysregulated, which patients have similar trends in biology. And then with translational pharmacology, we're trying to understand a little bit more about drug biology, right? How would the drug work in real humans as opposed to animals? What doses should we use? What biomarkers should we measure that we can effectively measure the same thing in the clinic, right? And then ultimately with real-world biomarkers, we are really using that to understand patient biology. Now, if we put these drugs in the humans, how can we understand which patients will likely respond? We need to monitor how the disease evolves over time because, the disease states may change as well. And then how can we monitor these patients even outside of clinical trials? So there's this emergence of wearables and things like that technology coming up. So ultimately, the focus of drug discovery is really how we connect disease biology with drug biology, with also patient biology, right, to really extract meaningful insights. And it's not just about generating more data. We already have a lot of data in the field. Of course, it's good to have more relevant data coming up, but it's really how we connect this data to really allow us to generate information that we need. So let's dig a little bit deeper as to how this data are collected in the drug discovery process. So if you would be taking one of the computational course or drug discovery course, you would learn that the drug discovery process often starts with target ID, where we would identify a target which is driving the disease and study if it's worth intervening. And then later on, we'll go on to screen for a large, library of drug molecules to find molecules that can, hit those targets. And then we'll be using preclinical models like animal models or cell-based assays to evaluate efficacies and biomarkers before they go into the phase 1. And that's where we would be looking at how these drugs are behaving first in humans. Usually these phase 1s are about finding the optimal dose, looking at safety and exposure. And then when it passes phase 1, it will get to phase 2, where we will test in a larger population of patients to establish efficacy and proof of concept. And finally, with phase 3, this would be more larger trials, global trials, right, that we will implement broader into the clinic. So once FDA approves it, then we would be able to go into phase 4, where we can monitor long-term efficacy of these molecules. So all in all, you would imagine that this process is very long. It takes about 10 years traditionally to get a molecule, sometimes even more than 10 years, right, from target ID all the way to phase 4. So what we are doing right now in the context of these different technologies is trying to collect data at all these various stages of the drug discovery process and thinking about how we can use AI, right, to integrate all this information. So hopefully you'll be able to get some exposure into some of these technologies, and I'll be looking forward to see what you guys can come up with. So with AI, just sharing a little bit of a joke, like thinking about the previous speakers, right? Like I have young children at home, so my 9-year-old daughter came home one day after school to ask me, Mommy, there's AI now, right? Like, if there's AI, will you lose your job, next time because you're getting old, right? And I told her that, I have to learn AI so that I can be better at being a scientist, right? You won't be able to use AI to find out how angry I am with you now. So she took out her phone and then she starts going to check, why is Mommy angry? So that's the funny story about how kids are exposed to AI right now. But I would like to just say that with AI, we can really do big things in drug discovery. So, for example, in Target ID, we are starting to integrate all this multi-omics data, clinical data, real-world data sets to generate a little bit more confidence as to are we hitting the right disease biology. And then we can even use AI to really computationally screen molecules virtually, right? To narrow down to a smaller subset of molecules that we will subsequently validate and test so that we don't have to always go back to screen millions of compounds, right? So this is very intentional screening. And then with preclinical, we have AI to help us to have predictive data models. So we feed all this data, preclinical data into the system, and then we can use this AI to do in silico modeling, right? To understand what doses to give to the patients. Even with filing, like something like regulatory filing, we can use AI to collate all this data to support faster submissions. And then once it gets to the clinic, what we would be using AI to do is to really integrate all this biomarker information, use AI to design the clinical trials, monitor trial performance, and eventually be able to monitor some of these trials in real time. So ultimately, this is not a one-way process, right? We would be able to feed back this data back into the pipeline for the next generation drug discovery. So this is what AI can do, right? Previously, it was a very long, winding road, and now we are hoping to be able to use AI to ride on the expressway to enhance our learning. Even as a scientist, I use AI every day to help me collate information so that I can read up on literature and learn faster. Hopefully, we will be able to develop molecules with a shorter timeline as well. Okay. And then the last concept here is around drug discovery as a team sport, right? We are all skillful in our own ways, but we can't be the master of all trades, right? So if we think about drug discovery, we need biology knowledge, we need technology, we need data science, and you need people who are well-versed in all these areas to be able to connect the dots, right? So I would like to imagine that, this can only be achieved through collaborations locally within Singapore and also with the region and globally as well. And then different, groups of people bring in different flavors, right? For example, for patients, we need to engage with patients as well in terms of partnerships, understand their perspective, help us understand the purpose of why we are developing these drugs. With hospitals, we can get access to patient tissues. We are able to obtain clinical insights and real-world experience from the doctors. With academia, this is where we will engage with academia and universities for training. The universities have very good research, right? There's a lot of research excellence happening around innovative scientific discovery, and this is how we want to collaborate. And then with biotech, there's agility, entrepreneurship. A lot of the new modalities, therapeutic modalities, actually come from the biotechs. And then last of all, with industry like us, we can provide the scale. We can provide the development expertise to take these drugs into the market. So really, it's all about being able to collaborate broadly, and no single scientist or organization can do it all, right? So this is a concept that you have to take that in your course as well as you learn about this. So how will precision medicine shape the future? Like, many people think that precision medicine is about genomics, right? It's good to understand what our genomic profiles are, but it's actually more than that, right? It's about looking at patients here with different biomarker profiles. So what are biomarkers? So if I think about biomarkers, they are actually markers in our biology system that provides insights that help us to guide the prediction, the diagnosis, and the treatment for our patients. So molecular biomarkers. So for example, when I was working in NUH in clinical diagnosis about more than 20 years ago, one of the first tasks I had to do was to learn how to measure HbA1c from a patient sample so that we can diagnose these patients for diabetes, right? And we will also look like molecular markers like factor 5 to look at how predisposed a patient is to blood clotting and stuff like that. So these biomarkers are really markers that are useful in helping understand the innate risk and the disease drivers. With tissue markers, this is a little bit different because we can reveal the disease biologies in a spatial context, right? So if we have a tissue, you can imagine there's lots of cells around it, right? So how do we know how the cells interact, right, in the tissue environment? And this is where we have techniques like histopathology, spatial biology, to help us understand these biomarkers a little bit more. With functional markers, this is where in the lab we would be using these markers to measure cellular and tissue biology in a context which allows us to predict drug efficacy. And last of all, with radiographic physiological markers, these are really non-invasive biomarkers that we hope to be able to deploy to the clinic at some point that will allow us to visualize like organ level diseases, what the disease burden is like, how is it progressing, and how the treatments are responding, right? We can use things like radiology markers to look at that. And then physiological markers are what is already happening right now. We monitor BP, ECGs, and stuff like that. And then last of all, this is also an emerging area for blood-based biomarkers. We are starting to see markers such as exosomes and metabolites and cytokines coming up that are able to help us understand what the patient's profile is and how our drugs is doing to these patients. So all in all, these biomarkers, when we collect this different data, it helps us to transform that into precision medicine in different ways, right? We use these markers for diagnosis, like what I mentioned about HbA1c. We can also use that as a predictive marker to understand which patients are likely to respond. So for example, for patients with cancer, we will, right now the standard practice is we'll measure their PD-L1 level to see whether they will be eligible to checkpoint inhibitor treatments. And then for drug companies, right, we would also look at safety biomarkers. So because many drugs does pass through the liver, so we have to look at liver toxicity in many of our clinical trials, right? So overall, these biomarkers can convert this biological information into real clinical action and allow us to tailor decisions based on the patient. So clinical trials in future, all in all, it will be shaping from a traditional trial model where we target large heterogeneous patient population. We look at treatment versus control. In future, it will no longer be like that, right? We would use biomarkers to select for patients. And then after that, we would be able to look at individual patient subgroups to look at their biomarker profiles to see how they respond with the treatment. So all in all, future clinical trials will be based on really biomarker guided selection. These trials will be adaptive as well as we, understand more about the patient's profile. We might adapt our designs. And then the trials will be smarter and smaller. So last of all, I just wanted to end on with this slide to say, okay, how our pharmaceutical R&D is really driving impact for future precision medicine. So moving away from the traditional healthcare that I mentioned earlier that is reactive, one size fits all, we are going to a more proactive, predictive and personalized model. And at different stages of the disease itself, like the diagnosis, we are able to gather all this information, right? Use human genetics, omics to understand the disease, to generate new biological insights so that we can design even more innovative medicines. And then with biomarker screening, we will be able to collate personalized profiles from different patients and be able to use this to have predictive biomarkers for us to use in the clinic. And then last of all, with better targets better drug modalities. Hopefully we would be able to translate that into fit for purpose clinical development and be able to apply them to the clinic in a smarter way. So I hope this gives you a good overview of what the industry is moving towards into this era of precision medicine. And I'll maybe hand off to Matt to talk a little bit about the skills that you might want to focus on to be successful in this area.
Very much so. So what is something, I think something that would be in your mind right now, as you think of skills, is like, how do I get a job? In 2 years' time, how am I employable? How am I going to stay employed in the future? I'd like to challenge your thinking. Maybe there's a different way of thinking about it. Maybe we think of it as a way, how do you add value to your future workplaces, to your future patients, right? So think of it in a, how do I add value? It gives us a bit more creativity and more space to actually imagine. What I mean is this, is that, deep expertise still matters. So I think there were some very interesting questions in the break that we had earlier about interdisciplinary and going deep in areas. And we know that it's, the reason why you need deep expertise is because, if you only have a superficial understanding of the disease area, you have a superficial understanding of statistics, you have a superficial understanding of AI, or in the clinic, you'll only get superficial answers, right? And you'll only ask superficial questions. So we really need this depth in biology, pathophysiology, experimental design, and this is where I think has already been mentioned that AI can support you. But if you think about it, what is the value that you can add in the future by having deep expertise? You can answer more of these questions. You can ask, you can interpret evidence, you can challenge your assumptions, you can make even better decisions. So I think we've seen it in your lifetimes. We've already seen it. Technology is going to change. So you need to find a way that the value that you add is not going to be eroded by technology. And part of it is asking good questions and being able to find value between disciplines. So I think it's already mentioned as well that data literacy is becoming essential. I think that should be beyond doubt now. And in this area, just in the pharmaceutical industry, you can see that there's so many different areas that are data intensive. You see omics data, referring to like study of bulk proteins, genomics, and other molecules in the body, imaging data, biomarker data, assays, clinical data, all coming together. And it takes quite a bit of literacy to understand that and to learn how to integrate that, even use it to ask the right questions. And for those of us who are, might be coming from a data, from a computer background, that's great, right? I mean, this is maybe this is your bread and butter. You're making sense of complex data sets. But also from, if you come from the clinical, the biological side, you sort of need to be able to talk to the computer scientists. You talk to the software people so that you can understand kind of questions and answers that can be developed. So we see, these are some essential skills that I'm sure many of you are trying desperately to add to your resumes. And this is great. These are very important. Think of it again as a value that you can add. So we find very important, it's like, okay, it's fairly easy to just create plots, but to actually create a plot that actually helps to give clarity on how you interpret data, how you ask questions, that is not so easy. So that's something that I challenge you to, as you do this course, we get exposed to so many different technology areas, right? How do you communicate this? How do you find the essence of what this technology is telling you, and how do you communicate that to people? It's going to be very important. So, okay, yes, not everyone needs the code, but you need to be able to have enough understanding of what the code can and can't do, especially what it can't do. But as you talk with people, that's where you can start to, with the people who are actually doing maybe more professional, who are much further on in coding, that's where you can start to add value to them. Now, of course, this course is about working across disciplines, which is amazing. And I think it's already been mentioned, the future scientist is not going to be necessarily stuck into one of these areas. I myself have jumped across many different fields, like chemical engineering, medical science, I grew human embryonic stem cells at one point, and then, you sacrifice all your weekends for that, right? And then, but even, these all transfer, like what you learn out of it can actually transfer across different domains, the pharmaceutical, R&D, even to try to solve problems in the airline industry. These are all the same skill sets, actually. So you can see there's an alliance between clinicians, engineers, regulatory people, patients, data scientists, and biologists. And I think a concept that I think many of you may be hearing for the first time is looking at this I-shaped talent versus a T-shaped talent. So in the past, I-shaped talent is someone who's going down into the specifics, like we mentioned, like the old professors, the professors of old, the professors of old, you really, typically it was someone who went deep into one specific area, right? Now what we're looking for is, you have a deep technical expertise in one area, one discipline, and you have a broad understanding of adjacent fields. Why is that important? It's because, let's say if you only know how to act as an analyst, right? Or if you only know how to act as a biologist, you're not going to be able to ask the right kind of questions that bring people together, that actually provide more value than if you just stayed in your discipline. So I think that the key I want to communicate and challenge you is to think about what value can I add? And how is this course adding value to you so that you can add value to others? And so with that T-shape is how you connect. So you can imagine T-shape next to another T-shape, that's how you talk, right? So, for example, if you gave a software engineer, real story, if you gave a software engineer, hey, can you convert these genomic databases, VCF files, right, into a usable database, right? So, said, okay, super confident we can. 2 weeks later, come back. How do you even read this thing, right? So we need people to understand what is actually being coded in the information, and then we're actually able to co-construct, a very high performance database. Just querying terabytes of data, just down to less than a minute. So it's important, working across disciplines. So that's going to be very important. Have your domain expertise, but also be able to cross. So I think it's already been mentioned about curiosity, adaptability, and critical thinking that matters. How much more so in this era, where our tools are becoming more AI assisted, our models are becoming a lot more sophisticated and are telling us a lot more than they did in the past. And our data is becoming more integrated. We are also moving towards, away from manual interpretation down to using AI to synthesize insights and to generate, to synthesize across a lot of literature papers. And it's super fast. Like in the past, I would have to spend maybe 2-3 weeks, digging into literature. Now it's just, it's just hours to just maybe a day is needed. So looking at animal models as well, to moving from that to actually more predictive models. And rather than siloed information, now that all the rage is connecting disparate systems in pharma companies through knowledge graphs, and moving from this long linear process to a lot more faster, a lot more competitive drug discovery. So AI is important; it will accelerate, but it won't replace human curiosity. So I think be curious and keep learning. That's where you can continue to add value. When you keep learning and developing yourself, that's actually the secret, right? This is actually the best hedge against inflation, right? If you keep learning, if you keep updating yourself, the role, the job market, the technology area is going to be very different in 10 years' time. Okay? But if you are able to keep learning and learning how to learn, you're definitely going to keep ahead. So I think important in all this is that core to pharmaceutical discovery is actually never lose sight of the patient. The science will change, the tools will change, the purpose always remains the same. We want to help patients live healthier lives. As we've entered a new era of precision medicine, prediction, prevention, we want to get excited, but we don't by the technologies, but we're not defined by them. I think 100 years ago, technologies were also different, right? We want to keep learning how to connect science, to connect data and medicine, and not just master one discipline. We want to stay curious, adaptable, keep learning. And always remember that ultimate goal is to make a meaningful difference for patients. That is the most important thing. If you're not, if to add value to the patients, it's a good chance you might get obsolete soon. So yes, let's keep the conversation going. So quite a few of us from MSD are here today. And we would love to chat and hear about your backgrounds. Just early in the break, having so much fun and hearing about all the different backgrounds people come from. All the wonderful questions and curious things that you have to ask as well. And I think we also want to leave you with this quote, right? That we try never to forget that medicine is for the people. It is not for the profits. The profits follow, and if we have remembered that, they have never failed to appear. So this is a quote by George Mark. Yeah. So with that, yeah. Thank you.